afternoon and hello and welcome to a new episode of our program Africa Today. I'm Yasmin Bakir, and of course this program that brings you the latest updates in the African continent. And to speak of the African continent, we're going to start off by taking a look at South Sudan and the changes that took place in South Sudan since its independence in 2011. Not only that, but the significant role that Egypt has played in maintaining stability and security in South Sudan. Let's take a look at this report.
Egypt has provided medical services and dispersed medicines for up to 1,822 citizens in South Sudan in a medical convoy carriage sent to the capital Juba to support the country's healthcare sector. According to a statement by the Health Ministry on Monday, the convoy included a 5-ton aid shipment for surgical supplies and equipment. The statement added that another 8 shipment carrying drugs for hepatitis B and C has been sent to South Sudan. The aid is part of the President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's initiative to treat 100 million Africans. President el-Sisi has directed Egypt Health Minister Haile Zaid to provide all necessary medical support to South Sudan. In August, Zaid met with her South Sudan's counterpart in Juba, where they toured several medical centers in the capital, including the Egyptian Kidney and the Lazis Center at the Juba Teaching Hospital. Both ministers discussed developing and strengthening cooperation between the two countries in the medical sector.
And going back again to the top stories here in Egypt, and specifically on the National Elections Authority, who had announced on Monday that the final results of the last stage of the runoffs for the parliamentary elections of 2020 will be which was held earlier in this month. And according to the official statements released by the National Elections Authority, 100 new MPs have been elected during this round. Now, as many as 202 candidates have been vied so far for the 100 seats that are allocated for Qalibiya, Dahlaya, Menofia, Gharbiya, and several other governorates here in Egypt. But of course, to talk more about the statements that have been released on Monday by the National Elections Authority and what are we expecting at the parliament, which is going to be established and fully completed in terms of seats and nominations throughout the end of this year. And we're joined over the phone by Dr. Ayman Abu Layla, who's a member of parliament. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Tell us about these statements that have been released by the National Elections Authority, and what are we expecting in the upcoming period concerning the new parliament of 2020?
First of all, I have to congratulate all the Egyptians about the success of proceeding two main chamber, legal chamber, and the parliamentarian life in Egypt have been enriched by two chambers, and definitely I have to thank all the members of the judges, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Interior Affairs, all who succeed to, during this pandemic, to let us elected all what we need as members in the two chambers. And this success is very promotion for the Egypt that there is full stability and full success in the life of Egyptians during this pandemic. This for sure I have to start with.
Yes, Doctor, now this expected upcoming parliament is very different by all means. Not only is there a Senate that's been established for the first time, but we also see that this parliament has a diversity in terms of the members for this parliament who are representing different governorates, whether they're on individual seats or even representing certain parties. And I'm going to talk about the youth participation and the women participation. So if you're going to give me a general scoop on how different is this new parliament from the previous one, what can you tell me?
Actually, let's talk about the first chamber. You have to talk about that we have now around 147 women elected till now, and I think others will be there during the the choice of our president, that they will reach 160 women. For the first time of our parliamentarian life, we have this number of women which succeed in all the fields. And definitely they will succeed also in the parliamentarian field. This is first point. The second point, of من أجل مصر have succeeded to collect all type of parties. We have 12 parties and a small group with the تنسيقية شباب الأحزاب or I don't know how to translate it, but actually there are young people in the political life that are trained. They will enrich the political life definitely and get more experience to be elected another time. But this parliament is completely different. We have 183 people below 40 years of age. We have 160 women. That is a new election which presents all Egypt inside the chamber.
Mr. Ayman Abu Al-Ila, Member of Parliament, thank you very much for joining us, sir, for these latest top stories concerning the National Elections Authority's statements on Monday regarding the parliamentary elections and the results of 2020. Now, going back again to the African region, and this time all the way to Ethiopia, now the escalation and violence in Ethiopia is still ongoing between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray region. However, according to the Ethiopian Prime Minister Ahmed Abiy, he had ordered that things go back to normal and for the opposition to disarm themselves starting on Monday. Let's take a look at this report.
Ethiopia sent civil servants in Tigray back to work on Monday and ordered gun owners to disarm as Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government sought to show normality in the northern region after weeks of war. Some power and telephone links were also restored in regional capital Mekelle after a blackout since November 4th, but there were reports of massive fuel and food price hikes plus water shortages. Abiy has declared victory over the former local ruling party, the Tigray People's Liberation Front TPLF. The TPLF dominated federal government for nearly 3 decades before he took office in 2018, and they had feuded since then. Thousands of people are believed killed and nearly 1 million fled their homes during airstrikes and ground battles in Tigray. The government seized Mekelle home to 500,000 people on November 28th. The government said also that mobile voice services in Mekelle and 6 other towns had been restored and that electricity was also back in the regional capital. The Civil Aviation Authority said it reopened airspace in Tigray region on Monday. The new government-appointed Provisional Administration for Tigray has told state employees to return to work on Monday or be fired. Gun owners must hand in weapons by Tuesday or risk arrest.
Also speaking more about the African continent and specifically this time the relationship and the mutual cooperation between both Mauritania and Egypt, and in light of the phone call that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received on Sunday by his Mauritanian counterpart Mohamed Ould Ghazouani, and where the telephone conversation had discussed the mutual cooperation and the common grounds between both countries and the efforts that Egypt is exerting in maintaining stability in South Sudan and the role Egypt is exerting also in the development and the security of the entire African continent. Here's the story.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi discussed with his Mauritanian counterpart, President Mohamed Ould Ghazouani, counter-terrorism cooperation in Africa's Sahel area. In a phone call on Sunday, the President discussed cooperation in various fields, especially military and security cooperation, as well as trade exchange and economic cooperation. They reviewed viewpoints on some regional issues, including the Libyan crisis, in light of its implication on the national security on both countries and the region. President el-Sisi and Ghazouani affirmed their keenness to end the Libyan crisis through reaching a political solution that paves the way for the restoration of security and stability to the Arab country. They also discussed efforts to combat the coronavirus pandemic and have agreed on Egyptian-Mauritanian coordination in this regard through exchanging experiences and communication between relevant institutions of both countries. In February, Sisi said that Egypt is ready to host a special African summit to discuss setting up an African force tasked with fighting terrorism in the African continent.
To speak further more on this issue, we are joined over the phone by His Excellency Ambassador Hussein Hariri, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us, Your Excellency. Ambassador Hussein Hariri, thank you for joining us.
Yes, madam. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Egypt is playing a very pivotal role, not only in the Middle East, but also in the Horn of Africa, and specifically with its war against terrorism. The stability of the Sahel region, which was one of the issues that have been discussed by both Egyptian and Mauritanian leaders over the telephone last Sunday. How far do you think that has come along?
Well, this phone call between the Egyptian president and his Mauritanian counterpart came after a few days of the visit of the Egyptian president to Paris and the summit that was held in the French capital between President Sisi and President Emmanuel Macron. And during this summit, the situation in Sahel or Sub-Saharan Africa and the fight against terrorism there came up in the discussion. And I guess the phone call between President Sisi and the Mauritanian president came mainly in this context how to coordinate, cooperate between Egypt and Mauritania being a member country in the G5, the 5 Sahel countries that are cooperating with France in the military operation called Barkhane to fight terrorist groups in Al Sahel. So I guess the talk, this phone call, mainly stressed the need to cooperate more comprehensively with not only with Mauritania but with France on the one hand and the G5 on the other hand to combat terrorism in Al Sahel.
As you've correctly said, I mean, reflecting back on President's recent visit to France, and let's talk a little bit, strategically about the importance of the Sub-Saharan or the Sahel region in Africa, and why is maintaining security in this region very vital for the security of various African countries, including Egypt?
Well, I guess the terrorist groups operating in Sahel also have links with other terrorist groups operating in Libya, for instance, and in other parts of the Middle East. And the fact that Egypt is concentrating on cooperation with France, with like-minded countries, who are sincerely combating terrorist groups, so that there is no particular geographic region where the fight against terrorism should be limited. So this is according to the Egyptian point of view, the fight against terrorism should be comprehensive in the sense that regardless of the geographic region, the world community, international community should find terrorist groups wherever they are.
Yes, definitely. Now, President Sisi also reiterated his readiness to hold a special summit on Africa to discuss setting up an African force tasked with fighting terrorism in the continent. How important is this decision, and how will that be able to change the face of terrorism in the African continent that is being threatened, as you've correctly said, with many terrorist organizations because of its importance in terms of the resources that the African continent holds and, of course, its geographic positioning?
Well, it's an interesting idea that should be taken up by the African Union, and it's a long shot, madam. We can come up with such ideas but implementing them on the ground takes a long time and calls for a lot of financial resources and giant political will. As I said, it's a very interesting idea, but it's a long way from launching the idea and putting it on the ground.
Yes, Your Excellency, we have heard of the international peacekeeping forces in the region, but in the African continent. But to speak of African joint forces, that is something new of its nature. How do you think that would be able to be formed, and will that possibly be replacing the international peacekeeping forces in the African continent later on?
Well, let me begin with stating that the peacekeeping forces, these are United Nations mandated missions in order to safeguard certain countries according to Security Council resolutions. But this is a far cry from having a Pan-African force dedicated to fighting terrorism. These are two separate things, madam. These are two separate missions, and as I said, having a joint African force to combat terrorism, we are a long way from seeing such a force.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Hussein Hariri, former Assistant Foreign Minister, we'd like to thank you very much for joining us here on our program, Africa Today. Thank you for your contribution. And that brings us to the end of our episode, Africa Today. And thank you very much for watching. I'm Yasmin Bakir, signing off.